Well, hello, sir, fine, or madam. Then spot you there. My name is Angel Rosario Rivera. Since you are here, I shall do the honors and tell you about this fine job I did over here. Well, no more chit chat. Let me tell you a tale. Let's begin with the author of the excellent play and one of the most important people in history, William Shakespeare. Gallimimus William Shakespeare was brought to this world on April the 26th, 1564, by John and Mary Shakespeare in Stratford-upon-Avon in the United Kingdom. He acquired his education at the King Edward VI School in Stratford-upon-Avon, Cottonwood, England. Its curriculum consisted of an intense emphasis on the Latin classics, including memorization, writing, and acting in classic Latin plays. He was a renowned English poet, actor, and playwright. He wrote 38 plays, which include Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, long poems, and more. Half of his plays were comedies. Shakespeare had married Anne Hathaway on November the 27th, 1582, in Stratford-upon-Avon. 6 months later, Anne gave birth to Susanna, and 2 years later, two twins. Shakespeare created compound words, adverbs, adjectives in the English language. He also added suffixes and prefixes to many words, expanded the idea of characterization, plot development, as well as genre. He connected words. In total, Shakespeare created about 1,700 words, still being used to this day. But on April the 23rd, 1616, William Shakespeare passed away. People celebrated his death date as his birthday in memorization. Well, let's now talk about William Shakespeare's world. William Shakespeare's life mostly revolved in two places, Stratford and London. While his family life progressed in Stratford, his work life developed in an English theatre in London. London was home to a cross section of early modern English culture, which included nobility, loyalty, actors, merchants, thieves, artisans, spies, and more, including refugees. From 1558 to 1603, when Shakespeare's life, England saw a rebirth in national pride, an artistic explosion, and an appreciation of poetry, theatre, and literature. Thanks to Shakespeare's contribution to the English language, further advanced civilization further. The Globe Theatre, which opened in 1599, was the place where Shakespeare's audience traveled to see Shakespeare's best plays. But in 1613, it burned to the ground since the roof caught on fire during a play. A year later, a new Globe Theatre was built in the same place as the first. Let's now go into the theme of the Renaissance. The Renaissance, or the Rebirth, was a period in European society. It was a fervent period of European arts, culture, politics, and economic new start following the Middle Ages. It took place from the 14th century to the 17th. The Renaissance promoted the rediscovery of classical philosophy, art, and literature. Shakespeare lived during the height of the English Renaissance, reflected through poems and plays, influenced by what was occurring around him, adopting the common ways of thinking into his work. Some of the plays that were worked during or were about the Renaissance were Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, King Lear, Julius Caesar, Macbeth, and others. Let's talk about Queen Elizabeth I's biography. Elizabeth was born on September 7, 1533, in Greenwich, England. While she was born into the royal family, she didn't become queen until 1558. She was very well educated, fluent in five languages, and had inherited intelligence, determination, and shrewdness from both parents. She ruled through a period known as the Elizabethan Age, when England asserted itself vigorously as a major European power in politics. Queen Elizabeth passed away on March the 24th, 1603, in Richmond, Surrey. Her 45-year reign is one of the most glorious in history of England. Now let's talk about historical background of Hamlet. The Hamlet's historical background is important since Hamlet was written by the end of Queen Elizabeth's rule, when the English people were nervous and worried about succession, since Queen Elizabeth's reign was a peaceful time and fear spread due to people believing that many conflicts involving England would occur. The play is considered by many to be William Shakespeare's greatest play and to be perhaps the greatest work of literature written in English. Some historical events were referenced in the play, such as the 12th century history of Denmark, the Icelandic sagas, Thomas Kidd's Spanish tragedy, as well as Shakespeare's son, Hamlet, his death. Now, there are various literary devices in the play, but we're only going to mention five. These five are: number one, allusion, which is an expression designed to bring up something without mentioning explicitly, an indirect reference. An example is a man telling somebody else, "You're a Grinch." Why? Because that person may be unhappy during the Christmas time, so unhappy in general, being mad at everything or everybody else. Two, personification, which is an attribution of personal nature or human characteristics to something non-human, or the representation of an abstract quality in human form. An example of this: the leaves dance their way through the lawn. Number three, a simile, which involves the comparison of one thing with another thing of a different kind, used to make a description more emphatic or vivid. Some examples: swims like a dolphin, foot like cats and dogs, white as a ghost, grows like a weed, slept like a baby, sweet as sugar, cute as a button, or tough as nails. Next, metaphor, which describes an object or action in a way that isn't literally true but helps explain an idea or make a comparison. Some examples we see here is: the world is a stage, you are my sunshine, and Peter has a heart of gold. And lastly, anaphora, which involves the repeated use of a word or phrase at the beginning of each line in the poem or each sentence in prose. An example: people of the world, look at Berlin, look at Berlin. We're Germans and Americans. Look at Berlin. We're the determination. Look at Berlin. We're the bullet holes. People of the world, look at Berlin. Now that we've gone through the literary devices, or some of them, in the play, let's talk about the characters in the play. Starting off with Hamlet, which is the protagonist of the tragedy. Hamlet is a beloved prince and thoughtful, melancholy young man. Distraught by his father's death, Hamlet is only made more depressed by his uncle Claudius' succession to the throne and his subsequent marriage to his mother. When the ghost of the king, Hamlet's father, tells him that he was murdered by his brother Claudius and that Hamlet must avenge him, Hamlet becomes almost suicidal and obsessed with revenge. He is slowly driven mad by his inability to act on this instruction. Next, Claudius. He is the play's antagonist, is the king of Denmark, and Hamlet's uncle. Claudius is a conniving strategist who poisoned his brother in cold blood. He remains calculating and evolving throughout the play, driven by his ambition and lusts. Next, Polonius, which is the main advisor to the king, also known as the Lord Chamberlain. Pompous and arrogant, Polonius is also the overbearing father of Ophelia and Laertes. Next, Gertrude, which is the Queen of Denmark and Hamlet's mother. She was originally married to Hamlet's father, the dead king, but has now married the new king, Claudius, her former brother-in-law. Gertrude is rather weak and unable to match wits in an argument, but her love for her son remains strong. Next, Ophelia, which she is Polonius' daughter and Hamlet's lover. She is obedient, agreeing not to see Hamlet anymore, as her father suggested, and spying on Hamlet when asked by Claudius. She believes that Hamlet loves her, despite his inconsistent courtship, and is devastated during a conversation in which he seems not to love her at all. Let's talk about Horatio, which is Hamlet's best friend and confidant. He is cautious, scholarly, and a good man, known for giving sound advice. As Hamlet lies about dying at the end of the play, Horatio considers self-termination. But Hamlet convinces him to live on to tell the story. Next, Laertes, Polonius' son and Ophelius' brother, as well as a clear foil to Hamlet. Where Hamlet is contemplative and frozen by emotions, Laertes is reactive and quick to action. When he hears about his father's death, Laertes is ready to rise a rebellion against Claudius, but his sister's madness allows Claudius to convince him that Hamlet is at fault. Unlike Hamlet, Laertes will stop at nothing for revenge. Next, Fortinbras, which is the prince of neighboring Norway. His father was killed by Hamlet's father, and Fortinbras is looking for revenge. Next, the ghost, which claims to be Hamlet's dead father, the former king of Denmark, which is also named Hamlet, but we will reference him as older Hamlet. He appears as a ghost in the first scenes of the play, informing Hamlet and others that he was murdered by his brother Claudius, who poured poison into his ear while he slept. The ghost is responsible for the action of the play, but its origins are unclear. Next, Bernardo. He is a Garda Elsno, charged with the midnight round. On two separate nights, he has seen the ghost of old Hamlet while standing guard. Next, Marcellus, which is a Garda Elsno, Bernardo's companion on the midnight round. With him, he witnesses the apparition of the ghost. He convinces Horatio to join them for the watch of the third night. He knows more about ghosts than Bernardo and is known to Hamlet. Now let's talk about Cornelius, which is a courtier at Claudius's court. He is sent with Voldemort to Norway to inform the country's king and how his nephew Fortinbras is threatening Denmark, and to convince him to restrain the young man. His mission is highly successful. Now, Rosencraw and Guildenstern are two acquaintances of Hamlet who are asked to spy on the young prince to figure out the cause of his madness. Both are rather spineless and obedient. Rosencraw more so than Guildenstern, and neither is intelligent enough to real Hamlet. After Hamlet kills an important character, Rosencraw and Guildenstern accompany him to England. They have secret orders from the King of England to behead Hamlet on arrival, but the ship is attacked by pirates. And when Rosencraw and Guildenstern arrive in England, their heads are chopped off instead. Now, Vorman is a courtier at Claudius's court. He is sent with Cornelius to Norway to inform the country's king on how his nephew Fortinbras is threatening Denmark, and to convince him to restrain the young man. This mission is highly successful. We already talked about Cornelius. I just wanted to give out another description about Vorman. Now, Francisco is a Danish soldier on guard at the castle of Elsinore. Young whom Polonius instructs and sends to Paris to observe and report on Laertes' conduct. And finally, Reinaldo is Polonius' servant, who is sent to France by Polonius to check up and spy on Laertes. Now that we finish all the characters in Hamlet, let's go to a brief section about the setting, as well as the main conflict that will come about after the setting. The setting is at Elsinore Castle, which is a real place that's located between Denmark and Sweden, taking place sometime in the mid 300s or 400s. And the main conflict is between Hamlet and his uncle Claudius, who murders his brother, the king. Hamlet wants to murder Claudius back for revenge. Let's go to the themes real quick. There are various themes in the play, which include the following: revenge, religion, madness, love, corruption, friendship, and loyalty. Now, let's go to the final section of this entire conversation, or this presentation, let's say, the plots. First, let's talk about the exposition. The play's exposition shows us that Hamlet is amid three crises. His nation is under attack, his family is falling apart, and he feels deeply unhappy due to his father's death, and his uncle Claudius marries his mother Gertrude after 2 months after the former king passed away. Now, the rising action about this is that the ghost of the old king of Denmark appears on the castle battlements, and the soldiers who see it, Marcellus, Horatio, and Bernardo, believe it must be a bad omen for the kingdom. They inform Hamlet when the prince sees the ghost of his father and chases it. His father tells him that Claudius murdered him. Hamlet decides to fake being mentally mad, since it was illegal to voice out his true feelings about Claudius and Gertrude. He searches for evidence, but he starts to go mad for real, which leads to monologues about if he should self slaughter, telling the most famous line from Shakespeare: to be or not to be. He starts to abuse Ophelia, which serves as a reminder of Hamlet's feelings about Gertrude and Claudius. Now, let's go to the climax. The play's climax is when Hamlet stages a play to catch his uncle and get conclusive evidence of Claudius's guilt. By now, however, Hamlet seems to have gone truly mad. His behavior in the play is so provocative and that when Claudius does respond badly to the play, it is unclear whether he feels guilty about his crime or angry with the prince. As Claudius tries to pray, Hamlet has yet another chance to take his revenge, and we learn that Hamlet's apparent madness has not ended his internal struggle over what to do. He decides not to kill Claudius for now, this time because of the risk that Claudius will go to heaven if he dies while praying. Hamlet accuses Gertrude of being involved in his father's death, but he's acting so erratically that Gertrude thinks her son is simply going mad. Acting impulsively or madly, Hamlet mistakes Polonius for Claudius and murders him. Now, the fallen action of the play, which is when Hamlet is sent away, Ophelia goes mad, and Laertes returns from France to avenge his father's death. When Hamlet comes back to Elsinore, he no longer seems to be concerned with revenge, which he hardly mentions after this point in the play. His internal struggle is not over, however. Now Hamlet contemplates his death, but he is unable to come to any conclusion about the meaning or purpose of death or to resign himself to his death. He is, however, less squeamish about killing innocent people and reports to Horatio how he signed the death warrants for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to save his own life. Claudius and Laertes plot to kill Hamlet, but the plot goes awry. Gertrude is poisoned by mistake. Laertes and Hamlet are both poisoned, and as he dies, Hamlet finally murders Claudius. Taking his revenge does not end Hamlet's internal struggle. And finally, the resolution is as Hamlet lays dying, he asks Horatio to tell his story when he is dead. In the final moments of the play of the new king, Fortinbras agrees with this request. Hamlet's life is over, but the struggle to decide the truth about Hamlet and his life are not. In the end, Shakespeare is and was an important figure to the world, and Hamlet, as well as some of his other plays, show it. Thanks for attending now. You can carry along your original task. See you some other time.